Okay, let's dive into this. There was a Russian drone attack targeting the Chernobyl nuclear power plant.
That's right. Specifically on February 14th, a kamikaze drone.
Yeah, and Chernobyl, I mean, that name alone brings back images of the worst nuclear accident ever, doesn't it? There's that huge exclusion zone, 1,000 square miles, still uninhabitable.
Absolutely. But a drone strike there. On top of everything else,
Yeah,
it's concerning.
it really is. And we're looking at a report here from the Kyiv Independent, and they're arguing this is actually a much bigger deal than, you might first think.
Well, what really jumps out is the sheer audacity, the
Yeah.
boldness of it. This wasn't just some stray projectile. It was a direct hit.
On the new safe confinement, right, the massive structure they built over the old reactor.
Exactly. The very thing designed to prevent more disaster. And the report says it left a hole big enough to drive an SUV through.
An SUV, wow. Okay, so that kind of impact on something so critical.
Ah,
Yeah, that's alarming.
it is.
So that's our mission today, really, to unpack what this actually means based on what the Kyiv Independent is reporting.
They seem to point to two main problems right away.
Yeah, first, obviously, a breach in this vital containment shell. And second, an impact on its key functions, specifically how it regulates internal pressure and also its insulation.
And I think to really grasp why this drone strike is so serious, we kind of need to rewind a bit. Remember the original disaster and, what an enormous task building that confinement structure was in the first place.
Good point. Okay, so the original meltdown, 39 years ago now, April 26th, 1:23 a.m., a date burned into history.
And the Kyiv Independent Report reminds us it was actually only about 5% of the reactor core that got dispersed.
Only 5%, but even that small fraction released, what was it, 400 times more radiation than the Hiroshima bomb?
That's the figure they use. It's just mind-boggling when you put it like that.
And it wasn't just one thing, right? It was a mix of radioactive materials.
Yeah, uranium, plutonium, and this stuff called corium, which is basically like a lava mix of the nuclear fuel, the control rods, everything that melted down. Super radioactive, a really long-term hazard.
But the report stresses that the immediate ongoing danger was particle radiation.
Right. They use this comparison. Think of pollen. You know how it gets everywhere, floats in the air, you breathe it in.
Yeah, allergy season nightmare.
Exactly. Now imagine that, but multiplied like 1,000,000 times in terms of danger and how easily it spreads if disturbed. That's the kind of particle radiation we're talking about.
And there are still tons of that radioactive dust inside the old reactor structure.
An estimated 4 tons, yeah, just sitting there.
Which is precisely why they had to build something over it immediately, right? That first sarcophagus.
Right, the one the Soviets put up really fast, in just 7 months. Its main job was just basic containment, stop that dust being blown around by the wind or washed away by rain.
But, well, it wasn't exactly a perfect solution, was it? The Kyiv Independent points out it was built in such a hurry.
Definitely. It had major limitations. The roof wasn't sealed properly, the joints weren't tight, so rainwater got in, which is obviously bad.
The report calls it a Band-Aid over a bullet wound. That really paints a picture. And it was only meant to last, what, 20 or 30 years?
That was the hope.
Yeah.
But it started falling apart much sooner. By 2008, it was so unstable they had to put up external scaffolding just to prop it up, basically, to stop it collapsing.
So it was clear, okay, we need something much, much better, a real long-term fix.
Which brings us to the new safe confinement, the NSC.
And the Kyiv Independent rightly calls this thing a momentous achievement, a once-in-a-century endeavor.
And you see why when you look at the scale. It's enormous.
Yeah.
Big enough to slide over a 30-story building.
They use that great analogy like a studio apartment for the Statue of Liberty. Just gives you a sense of the sheer size.
And building it was, the engineering challenges were unbelievable.
How do you build something that massive right next to the unstable old structure without causing it to collapse?
And protecting the workers from all that radiation while they did it. It was an incredibly complex operation.
Took nearly a decade, cost almost $2 billion.
And designed to last 100 years.
Yeah.
Built to withstand, massive earthquakes, tornadoes, extreme weather. They really tried to think of everything.
Almost everything. As the Kyiv Independent notes, rather chillingly, they didn't really factor in a full-scale war.
And that drone strike went right through the walls. Nearly 40 feet thick, double walls. Piercing that immediately compromised how it works.
Right. Let's talk about those functions. The first one is maybe counterintuitive. It's about air pressure.
Exactly. It's not totally sealed airtight. Instead, there's this sophisticated ventilation system.
And it keeps the pressure inside just slightly lower than the pressure outside.
Just a tiny bit lower, yeah. about 5 to 8 pascals.
Hmm.
And basic physics tells you air moves from high pressure to low pressure,
So air is constantly being pulled in through any tiny gaps.
which means the radioactive dust inside can't easily leak out. It's a clever containment method.
But a hole the size of an SUV? Well, that obviously throws that whole pressure difference completely out of whack.
Completely disrupts it. And the second critical function that got hit was the insulation.
The stuff between the inner and outer walls?
Yes, waterproof insulation. Its job is to prevent moisture getting in and causing corrosion on the steel structure over that 100-year lifespan.
But the drone strike didn't just punch a hole, it actually set fire to that insulation.
It did. And the fire spread quite a bit, the report says, along the north side and part of the south side of the structure.
And it took almost 3 weeks to put out.
Nearly 3 weeks, yes. And here's the really wild part. To fight the fire, the emergency crews actually had to cut more holes into the confinement.
Wait, they had to damage it further to save it?
Essentially, yes. To get access to the burning insulation, the report describes it like a kind of radioactive whack-a-mole. It's just surreal.
So let's just recap where we are now. This $2 billion structure, meant to last a century, now has a massive hole and fire damage.
And the timing couldn't be worse. The Kyiv Independent highlights that the rainy season is approaching, temperatures are rising.
Both things that will speed up corrosion on the damaged steel.
Exactly, making repairs urgent.
Now, the report mentions, theoretically, the whole structure could be moved. It's on rails, right?
It was designed that way, yes.
Yeah.
The entire 36,000-ton structure is on tracks.
Yeah. But trying to move it now in its damaged state, the report says that would be incredibly risky.
Hugely risky. You risk further damage, maybe even compromising its stability completely.
Which brings us to the really troubling question, why? Why attack this specific structure?
Well, the Kyiv Independent suggests it fits into Russia's broader pattern of what people are calling rattling the nuclear saber.
Using threats related to nuclear safety to deter international support for Ukraine.
That seems to be the interpretation. We've seen other incidents, haven't we? The shelling around the Zaporizhia plant, Europe's largest.
Yeah, and those near misses at the South Ukraine and Khmelnytsky plants, too.
Plus, the constant reminders from Moscow about their nuclear arsenal. It does feel like a deliberate strategy to raise alarm bells.
Of course, Russia denies hitting Chernobyl. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov called it a fabrication and provocation by Kyiv.
Right, but the Kyiv Independent pushes back on that. They point out the accuracy of these drones. They can hit targets within about 200 meters.
So, hitting the NSC specifically, inside that massive 1,000 square mile zone, the chances of that being an accident seem pretty low.
Exceptionally low, statistically speaking. And they also note that Russian drones have been frequently spotted flying over Chernobyl anyway.
And this whole denial thing, it has echoes of the past, doesn't it?
It really does. The Kyiv Independent actually dug up some declassified KGB documents from 1986, just 3 months after the original disaster.
What did they show?
They clearly showed the Soviet Union actively covering things up. The real cause of the accident, how bad the damage was, how much radiation got out, how far the contamination spread, and the health impact on people. They kept it all secret.
I remember Mikhail Gorbachev didn't even speak publicly about it for, 18 days?
That's right. 18 days of silence. And when he did finally address it, his response was quite passive, even used some whataboutism to deflect blame.
It's a chilling parallel. And the key point the Kyiv Independent makes is that what happens at Chernobyl doesn't stay in Chernobyl.
No, the original disaster had global consequences. Another major incident there now, especially with the confinement damaged, the effects could spread far beyond Ukraine again.
And we should state clearly, deliberately attacking a nuclear facility is a war crime under the Geneva Convention.
Absolutely. And this new safe confinement. It wasn't just about containing the past disaster. It was supposed to be the key that allowed Ukraine to finally start the real cleanup.
Dealing with the remaining waste, starting to dismantle that crumbling old sarcophagus, which is apparently at risk of collapse by 2029.
Yes, that's the projection.
Yeah.
But the war, and now this attack, has put all those vital long-term plans completely on hold.
So it really boils down to a race against time, doesn't it?
It seems that way. Will Ukraine be able to repair the NSC quickly enough before more damage occurs from weather, or
before Russia strikes again?
That's the deeply unsettling question hanging over everything. The potential consequences are just immense.
Yeah, it definitely leaves you feeling uneasy. This attack just adds another layer of danger to an already incredibly dangerous situation.
And it forces you, I think, to consider the broader issue. What does it mean to have nuclear facilities caught up in active war zones, even if a catastrophic strike isn't the explicit goal?
Right. Given the history of secrecy around the first disaster and the current rhetoric,
Yeah.
what does this incident really tell us about the vulnerability of these sites?
And perhaps, what responsibility does the international community have here to prevent this kind of thing, to ensure these places remain secure, even amidst conflict? Well, certainly a lot to think about.